forces. Means that we have to react, and that is the 5% defense pledge, including 3.5% spent on core defense, and that has to do, of course, with men and women in uniform, but also with making sure that the defense industrial base can deliver the output necessary, like your defense industrial base in Turkey. There are over 3,000 companies, part of that defense industrial base, delivers the output to make sure that we can deter and defend. But then it is up to each nation to decide how do we get enough men and women in uniform. So you will have some nations with conscription, you will have some nations with models which are discussing conscription or make it more voluntary, like for example, the recent decisions in Germany. Germany, I understand, there is a constraint by the constitution to also make that offer to the women, young women in Germany. We see in Norway that in the meantime now 1 in 3 men and women in uniform in Norway are women. So this is rapidly building up. But in the end, it's up to each nation. What we will look at consistently is our nations delivering what they promise to do when it comes to interoperability, command and control, and when it comes to your specific question, the capability targets, including the size of the armed forces and industrial output. And of course, the money spent on that. But then those specific decisions are up to each country.
Okay, we have time for a few more. We'll go to the 4th row on the aisle.
Union, Ukraine, Dmytro Klitschko. Let's imagine the negotiations break down, both sides continue fighting, and USA stops supplying weapons to Ukraine even for money. Do you have a plan B for this? Thank you.
Well, I do not. No, I don't think that plan B we have to think about. Because the US is very consistent in its support for Ukraine, like all NATO allies are very consistent. Of course, what the US told us is we want to supply Ukraine with the necessary weapons, both lethal and non-lethal, but we expect Europeans and Canadians to step up when it comes to the paying for it. And that's this Pearl program, where the US is delivering the necessary weapons, including the air defense systems and the PAC-3 missiles for the Patriot systems, but also for the other air defense systems, and all the other stuff and all the military gear you need to stay as strong as possible in the fight, paid for by European and Canadian allies. That is the big program which started in July, and at the moment already 4 billion, and I think by the end of the year 5 billion of that supply will have been delivered to Ukraine, critical material. But I have no reason to think that we have to prepare for those eventualities.
Okay, 3rd row in the center here.
Mikhail Kalinin, The Insider, Russian Media in Exile. So my question is, what real pressure can NATO put on Russia to end the war, and why should it work? Because by now we don't see that Russia is ready to end the war, and nothing seems to work.
Well, there is a peace process ongoing, and let's do the max to make that into a success. But if it is not successful, and what we have done consistently over the last 3-4 years, there's a couple of things. First of all, making sure Ukraine has the weapons it needs to fight the war. And the Pearl Initiative, starting in July and now having delivered at the end of this year at least over 4 billion, but I'm again confident we will get to the 5 billion for the full year, and then of course continuing the program next year of key US supplies to Ukraine, is also putting pressure on Russia, because it shows that we are serious. As I said, we are not going anywhere. We are serious. We will make sure that Ukraine has what it needs to stay in the fight. Secondly, we have the economic sanctions, which are having an impact on the Russian economy. There is only so much Putin can do to paper that over. To a certain extent, with some sovereign assets and whatever he has, he can try to give the impression to the Russian people that all is fine. But we know that increasingly it is hollowing out. And he is getting to the end of the line when it comes to these ways of covering up for the huge economic impact of the sanctions. Thirdly, what we are doing is indeed, when it comes to the shadow fleet, for example, increasingly taking action to make sure that we make it more difficult for the shadow fleet to sail. And if they pose a threat to the environment or to whatever vital infrastructure we have in our part of the world, that we will make sure that we intervene, and that's what we are doing. And all of this is putting pressure, of course, on the Russians, and we will continue doing so. And whenever there is a creative idea to do more, we will do more. But I feel all allies really being extremely motivated to get this done.
And just next to him in the third row here.
Hi, Alexei Minchonek, Belarusian independent media outlet Zerkalo. Relations between the United States and Belarus are going to improve. Now Washington has a special envoy for Belarus. In your opinion, shouldn't NATO also improve relations with Belarus? Could this help to separate the country from Russia?
Well, I commend the American initiatives to see how that relationship can be improved. And I'm in contact with the special envoy, who is a specialist on this, who is doing great work, who is also working on getting some of the people freed who are still in Belarusian custody. So all of this is positive. And of course, if other nations could help, we will. But at the moment, I think it is really important that the US is taking this initiative.
Okay, and final question, we'll go over here to Deutsche Welle.
Ksenia Polska, Deutsche Welle for Ukrainian and Russian service. Thank you very much for the floor. So you talked about what is already being done to put pressure on Russia, but I would like to know, you are familiar with the matter of the talks. I know you don't want to talk about the details very much, but do you know whether the Russian position, thanks to your American counterparts, has moved a tiny bit closer to the Ukrainian position within these days, thanks to all these measures that are being taken? And also, what should the next steps by NATO and the European Union, the allies and partners, be to actually make sure that at some point, and we hope sometime soon, both Russia and Ukraine sit at the table?
To your first question, I survived 14 years of Dutch media, and they're really tough. So I recognize the sort of question you ask, and I really respect it. But I will not get into it, because it still would get me into commenting on a process which I think benefits from me not commenting on it. So I will not do that. When it comes to the second question, we have to continue the pressure on Russia, because we do not know whether the peace process will eventually lead to a successful outcome. If so, we all pray for it. That would be fantastic, in a way where Ukraine is going forward as a sovereign nation, where Ukraine will be able to defend itself by its own armed forces, by credible security guarantees, so that other than what happened after the Minsk agreement, Russia will not try again post such a potential peace agreement. And that means continuing the flow of weapons, continuing the economic pressure, and therefore changing the calculus of President Putin, for him to understand that there is no way out, that eventually he will have to compromise, be it now, hopefully, and if not, in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you all so much, and have a good afternoon.
Have a great afternoon. Thank you.